I never believed a forest could watch a person. Trees were just trees, shadows were just shadows, and the world followed rules you could trust. That was what I believed my entire life, right up until the moment everything shattered above the Amazon rainforest. My name is Aidan Shaw. I am 27 years old, and I should have died the moment Flight AR-608 broke apart in midair. Instead, I survived, and something in that jungle made it very clear that my survival was not an accident. Something wanted me alive, and not for anything good. I was drifting in and out of sleep when the plane suddenly dropped. A coffee cup rolled down the aisle. Seatbelts snapped against their metal fixtures, and overhead luggage rattled violently. The lights flickered, and for a brief moment I felt an unnatural vibration passing through the frame of the plane. It felt like a deep groan, as if something enormous outside was pressing its weight against the aircraft. The woman sitting beside me grabbed my arm and asked what was happening. I tried to answer calmly, but even I heard the fear in my voice as I said it was only turbulence. The plane shook again, harder this time, and the floor vibrated like something alive was crawling beneath it. People began whispering nervously. Someone pressed the call button. A baby started crying. A bright flash lit up the windows. It was not lightning. There was no thunder, no storm front, no buildup of clouds. It was a silent burst of white light that lingered for several seconds, sliding across the side of the plane like a living sheen of fire. I turned to the window, covering my eyes with my hand, and for a fraction of a second I swore I saw a face in the cloud mass. It was impossibly long, pale, and hollow. The eyes looked like dim fires glowing inside empty sockets. The mouth was stretched unnaturally, pressed against some invisible barrier between the sky and the plane. I blinked, and it was gone. Before I could make sense of it, the entire right wing erupted into flames. A violent blast tore open the side of the cabin, sending metal fragments flying. Wind rushed in like a roaring tidal wave, nearly pulling passengers out of their seats. Oxygen masks shot downward, swinging like tangled puppets. People screamed, but the sound of the rushing air drowned nearly everything out. The plane tilted sharply. The woman beside me lost her grip on my arm and was sucked through the torn opening into the open sky. She vanished instantly, swallowed by the storm of falling debris. My seatbelt cut into my hips as the plane shook violently. The captain's voice tried to break through the speakers, but the intercom glitched, and only a few broken words reached us before the sound cut completely. The aircraft groaned again. I could feel it twisting beneath me. Something snapped behind my row, and then my entire seat section tore free. Suddenly there was no floor beneath me, no plane around me, only the violent scream of the wind as I fell downward with nothing to hold on to. I spun uncontrollably, sky becoming jungle and jungle becoming sky with every rotation. I saw flaming pieces of the plane falling around me like burning meteors. My ears rang. My eyes watered. I could not breathe. My chest felt like it was collapsing. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was hanging sideways. My seat had lodged between the branches of several massive trees. I was suspended at least 20 feet above the ground. For a moment, I did not understand where I was or how I had survived. Rain dripped from the thick canopy above me. Smoke floated through the air. Somewhere far away, metal hissed and cracked. I unbuckled myself carefully and climbed down, scraping my hands on rough bark. My legs were shaking so badly, I nearly lost my grip. When I finally reached the forest floor, everything felt unreal, as if the world had lost its edges. The wreckage was scattered everywhere. Small fires burned in patches. Bags, pieces of metal, clothing, and bodies lay in unnatural positions across the forest floor. I forced myself not to look too closely. I knew no one else had survived. I had felt the plane break apart around me. I had watched people vanish into the open air, but even surrounded by so much devastation, something else captured my attention. I felt an overwhelming pressure in the air, a heaviness that made my skin crawl. It felt like being watched from every direction at once, as if the trees themselves were leaning just slightly toward me. The jungle was too quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind moving through the leaves, only the distant crackle of burning metal. Then I heard it. a faint whisper behind me. A voice that did not sound entirely human, stretched thin and quiet, almost like breath passing through a hollow bone. "Aiden." I froze. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I turned slowly, but there was nothing behind me except dense vegetation and smoke drifting lazily through the air. No person, no creature, just stillness. But the whisper had been real. It had used my name. I swallowed hard and took a shaky step backward. The ground felt soft beneath my boots. The shadows between the trees seemed thicker than they should have been. Then I saw it, a shape standing just beyond the tree line, tall, thin, and impossibly still. Its outline was human at first glance, but wrong the more I stared at it. The head was tilted slightly, as if it was studying me. Its body was completely dark, blending into the shadows, yet its eyes glowed very faintly, like dim coals buried in ash. I blinked, and the figure was gone. I stayed frozen for almost a full minute. I could not breathe. My skin felt cold and damp. I was certain I had just hallucinated it. Shock. Trauma. A plane crash would do that. That was the only explanation, until I heard the whisper again. This time closer. This time clearer. "Aiden." The voice came from the trees directly behind me. I ran. I did not look back. I pushed through ferns and vines, stumbling over fallen branches and slipping on wet leaves. The forest pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. The air grew colder with every step. My chest burned as I tried to breathe. I stopped only when my legs gave out, and I slipped down a small slope, landing in soft mud near a shallow stream. I sat there shaking uncontrollably, listening to my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The jungle around me remained silent, too silent. Every survival instinct I had screamed that something was terribly wrong. The crash had not been the end. It was only the beginning. The sun was disappearing behind the dense canopy, but it felt darker than it should have. The shadows stretched long and strange between the trunks, twisting in ways that made my stomach tighten. I had no idea how far I had wandered from the crash site, and I did not want to find out. Every direction looked the same. Thick green walls of leaves and vines, enormous roots snaking across the ground like sleeping serpents, and trees so massive they blotted out almost all the fading light. My body ached from the fall and the climb, but I could not rest. Something told me the forest was waiting, and it was patient. I followed the stream that cut through the undergrowth, hoping it would lead me somewhere safe or at least help me find a way out. The water was cold and murky, reflecting the last streaks of sunlight, but I drank sparingly, knowing I needed to conserve my energy. As I walked, I felt eyes on me, though every time I turned, there was nothing. Just the twisting shapes of branches, the fluttering of birds retreating from the approaching night, and the occasional snapping of a small animal in the underbrush. The first time I heard a whisper calling my name again, I froze so completely that I thought I might collapse. It was faint, almost indistinguishable from the rustle of the leaves, but it was there, deliberate, drawing me further into the jungle. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, the trauma of the crash, fear magnifying every sound and shadow. But then, I saw something move. Between the trees, just at the edge of my vision, a dark shape shifted, tall, thin, unnaturally still. I stopped walking and focused, my pulse hammering in my ears. It was watching me, or perhaps following me. I could not tell if it had eyes, or if my mind was projecting what I expected to see. I forced myself to take another step, and the shadow moved in perfect coordination. Every time I paused, it paused. Every time I moved, it moved. It did not run. It did not hide. It simply mirrored me, a silent predator in the dying light. The sun finally disappeared completely, and the jungle became a black ocean of shapes and sounds. Night creatures called out from every direction, but the calls sounded wrong. Too deliberate, too loud, almost like laughter in the dark. I could hear the movement of something larger than any normal animal, and it was following me, patient and silent. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but the mud and roots were treacherous, slowing me down. My breath came in shallow gasps, and I could feel my hands trembling so badly that I could barely hold onto my makeshift walking stick. I stumbled into a small clearing where the remains of a broken tree trunk created a crude seat. I had no fire, no supplies, nothing but the clothes on my back and the small backpack that had survived the crash. I sank down and tried to control my shaking. The whisper came again, louder this time, insistent. "Aiden." I did not answer. I wanted to scream, to cry, to pray, but I could not. I could only sit and listen. Every rustle, every snap of a branch, every whisper made my heart leap into my throat. Hours passed like this, though I had no way of knowing how long. The darkness became almost solid, pressing against me from every side. Then I saw movement at the edge of the clearing. 2 glowing points, faint but unmistakable, hovering just above the ground. They were the eyes of something enormous, and I could feel their gaze piercing me. I wanted to stand, to run, but my legs refused. I had no idea how long it had been there, watching, waiting. The glowing eyes blinked slowly, deliberately, as if measuring me, studying me. I felt my body go cold. I realized then that the forest was alive in a way I had never imagined. It was aware. It had noticed me. Suddenly, a branch cracked behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. The shadows seemed to shift closer. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves, the deliberate sound of movement that had no source I could find. Panic clawed at my chest. I stood and ran blindly through the undergrowth, plunging through vines, leaping over roots, sliding down muddy slopes. The whisper followed me. "Aiden, Aiden." It was closer now, almost in my ear. I did not dare look back. I knew that if I did, I would see it fully, and that would be the end of me. My only goal was to keep moving, to stay ahead, to survive the first night. I stumbled into a small stream and waded through it, hoping the water might mask my scent or break whatever attention I had drawn. The air was damp and heavy, carrying a mix of rot, wet earth, and something else that made my stomach turn. The whisper came again, but now it was accompanied by something deeper, a low growl that I could feel in my chest more than hear. Something large was moving behind me, keeping pace with terrifying patience. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs were raw, but the sound persisted, relentless. Every so often, I glimpsed its form between the trees, tall, impossibly thin, moving in ways no human should be able to, always just at the edge of vision. The sight alone was enough to make my knees buckle. As night deepened, I finally found a small hollow beneath the roots of a massive tree. I crawled into it, covering my head with my arms, trying to become invisible. The darkness was complete, and I dared not breathe too loudly. Outside, the whisper circled, then stopped. For a long, terrifying moment, there was silence. Then the growl returned, deep and resonant, vibrating through the ground. I knew it had not left. It was still out there, patient, waiting for me to make a mistake. I did not sleep. I could not. Every sound, every shift of the trees, every movement in the shadows made me jump, cry out, and wish desperately that the sun would rise. When the first faint light appeared on the horizon, I crawled from my hiding place. My body ached. My muscles were torn from running and climbing through the jungle, but I was alive. I had survived the first night. I knew, though, that the jungle had only begun. The entities that had stalked me through the darkness would not forget me. They were patient, eternal, and they did not forgive. Whatever had survived the crash with me had marked me, and the Amazon was a predator far older and more cunning than anything I had ever faced. I had escaped the night, but the forest had already claimed my fear and was using it to hunt me. I rose to my feet and pressed on, following the stream deeper into the jungle. The whispers had stopped for now, but the knowledge that they were still there, lurking just beyond the reach of the fading light, never left me. Every rustle, every shadow, every movement reminded me that I was not alone, and I could not trust anything the jungle seemed to offer. The crash had been only the beginning. The real horror was just waking up, and it was waiting for me in the darkness ahead. The daylight brought little comfort. The forest was still dark in its own way, the canopy thick and oppressive, letting through only narrow shafts of light that danced over the wet leaves. The air smelled of damp earth and decay, but beneath that, I could sense something else, something older, something alive and patient. I followed the stream, moving cautiously, but I knew I could never truly escape the feeling that eyes were on me, watching my every step. Every branch that snapped beneath my feet, every leaf that rustled in the wind made my heart jump as though the jungle itself were speaking in a language I could not understand. I had survived the plane crash and the first night, but I was still trapped in this breathing, watching nightmare. Hours passed, though I could not tell exactly how many. The sun moved across the sky, but the jungle remained constant, unchanging in its oppressive presence. I stumbled over roots, slipped in the mud, and waded through the stream repeatedly, drinking sparingly, knowing I could not afford weakness. Every time I stopped, I felt the pressure of the forest tightening around me, as though the trees themselves leaned in to observe. The shadows between the trunks were not random anymore. They moved. Dark shapes slithered just beyond the edge of sight, never fully visible, but always there. Every so often, I glimpsed them, tall and thin, impossibly still, watching, waiting. I dared not look directly. My instinct screamed that to stare was to invite them closer. By late afternoon, I had come upon a fallen tree that created a natural bridge over the stream. As I stepped onto it, the water below churned unnaturally, though there was no disturbance from the current or wind. Then I heard a sound behind me, soft at first, like the rustle of a small animal, but growing deeper, heavier, deliberate. I spun around and saw it, a figure standing between two massive trunks. Its body was elongated, unnaturally thin, and its limbs bent in ways no human body could bend. Its face was a featureless void, yet I felt its gaze piercing through me. It did not move toward me, but the very presence of it made the air cold, thick, and suffocating. I froze, unsure if my mind was failing me or if the forest had finally revealed its truth. The figure vanished as quickly as it appeared, but I could feel it still following me. I ran, my feet slipping on the wet wood, my arms hitting branches as I pushed through the undergrowth. The whispers returned, a chorus of voices repeating my name, echoing around me. I had never been more aware of the fragility of life. I realized then that the forest was no ordinary jungle. It was alive with creatures that were patient, intelligent, and indifferent to human rules. Each step I took felt like trespassing on a land that had existed long before me, a place where humans were not meant to survive. By evening, I reached a small clearing that looked almost serene compared to the oppressive trees. I considered resting, but instinct and fear held me back. As I moved cautiously through the clearing, I noticed footprints in the mud. They were not human. They were too long, too narrow, with elongated toes and claw-like impressions. My stomach twisted as I realized the footprints followed the stream and appeared to be circling me. I wanted to turn back, but the path I had come from seemed too dangerous now, the shadows thick with movement. I had no choice but to move forward, deeper into the unknown. As night fell, the forest transformed. Every shadow became alive, every sound amplified. I could hear breathing that was not my own, low and resonant, vibrating through the ground. My heart pounded so loudly I feared the creatures would hear it, though I knew they already did. I stumbled upon an enormous tree with roots that formed a natural alcove. I crawled inside, pressing my back against the cool wood, trying to become invisible. The whispers circled the clearing, persistent, chanting my name in voices that were hollow and alien. I could feel the presence of something immense watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. The glowing eyes appeared again, faint but unmistakable, reflecting the dim light of the dying day. They did not blink. They did not move. They simply observed. Hours passed. I could not sleep. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves, every distant howl made my pulse spike. The darkness outside the alcove felt thick, almost tactile, pressing in against me, and I understood that the forest did not want to kill me quickly. It wanted to toy with me, to make me understand my insignificance. The growl returned, deeper this time, vibrating in my chest. I had no weapon, no light, no defense beyond my own speed and fear. I realized then that the forest itself was the predator, and the entities that lived within it were merely extensions of its will. My survival depended on staying ahead, on not looking back, and on never stopping. When the first light of dawn appeared, I emerged from my hiding place, muscles stiff and exhausted. My body ached, but the forest had not relaxed its grip. Every shadow, every movement, every whisper reminded me that I was still being hunted. The creatures were patient. They were eternal. They did not forgive. Whatever had survived the crash with me had marked me, and the jungle was already shaping the hunt. I followed the stream cautiously, knowing that I could not rest, could not slow down. The forest had awakened, and it would not allow me to leave. As I walked, I began to notice other signs of the entities. Trees were bent slightly as if leaning toward me, branches twisted into unnatural angles, and the mud along the stream showed patterns that made no sense. The creatures were clever, intelligent in a way that terrified me. They anticipated my movements, mirrored my path, and remained just at the edge of my perception. Every so often, the whisper returned, clear and deliberate, as if speaking through the air itself. It was always my name, a reminder that I was being watched, studied, hunted. I realized that the forest was not merely a place of survival. It was a living entity with patience, cunning, and hunger. By midday, I had grown desperate. My legs were numb, my hands raw from constant movement and contact with rough vegetation. Yet the thought of stopping, of resting for even a few minutes, filled me with dread. The shadows had become more aggressive, moving closer when I slowed, retreating when I ran, always stalking, always present. I did not know how many entities were following me, how many were waiting just out of sight. The realization was suffocating. I understood that I was not merely trying to escape the jungle. I was trying to survive the consciousness of the forest itself, embodied in creatures that were patient, relentless, and horrifyingly aware of me. The night that followed was worse than the first. The darkness came quickly, swallowing the jungle in unnatural blackness. The whispers returned almost immediately, closer now, circling the clearing where I tried to hide. The glowing eyes appeared again, but there were more this time, scattered among the trees, flickering in and out of vision. I pressed myself into the roots of a massive tree, trying to become invisible, my body shaking, every nerve screaming. The low growl returned, surrounding me from all sides, vibrating through the ground, reminding me that there was no escape. I understood then that I was not just lost in the Amazon. I was lost in the hunting ground of something ancient, intelligent, and predatory. I could feel the presence moving among the shadows. I dared not look directly. My mind could barely process what I sensed. Long limbs stretched and twisted unnaturally, sometimes glimpsed between trees, sometimes moving silently across the treetops. They watched, they waited, and they communicated in ways that went beyond human understanding. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but I knew that running without direction could be just as deadly as staying. The forest had claimed me, and it intended to keep me. Whatever survived the crash with me was patient, eternal, and not bound by human morality or mercy. I had survived the plane crash. I had survived the first night, but the jungle had awakened, and it would not allow me to leave. The dawn broke faint and gray through the thick canopy, but it offered no comfort. The forest remained oppressive, alive with a patience that chilled me to the bone. My body was battered from days of running, slipping, and climbing, yet exhaustion was a luxury I could not afford. Every rustle of leaves, every distant crack of wood, every whispering sound made me flinch. The creatures were patient, always just beyond the edge of sight, and I knew that the instant I slowed, I followed the stream, hoping it would lead me out, praying it would, though some part of me feared that there was no true exit. The forest had claimed me, and its claim was relentless. By mid-morning, I had come across a fallen tree so wide it formed a natural bridge over the stream. I stepped carefully, every sense alert, but the forest had begun to toy with me. Shadows moved independently of the sunlight, bending around me, stretching, twisting. I caught glimpses of figures flitting between the trees, tall, impossibly thin, their limbs bending in unnatural ways. I dared not look directly at them for long, fearing the effect their gaze might have. Each time I tried to rest, to take a moment to gather my strength, the whispers returned. My name, called softly, from every direction, as though the air itself spoke. I understood then that the forest's intelligence was not limited to the beings I could see. The entire jungle was alive, watching, calculating, using patience as its weapon. I could feel it pressing down on me. Subtle yet suffocating. As the sun climbed, the landscape grew increasingly treacherous. Roots twisted across the muddy ground, and vines coiled like serpents, ready to trip the unwary. The stream became a narrow torrent, rushing with sudden force, forcing me to navigate slippery stones and hidden holes. All the while, I felt their presence. Figures appeared at the edges of my vision, sometimes in the water, sometimes in the shadows of the trees. Always patient, always watching. One figure stepped forward, briefly illuminated by a stray sunbeam. It was impossibly tall, faceless, and its presence alone made my stomach churn. I ran, forcing my legs to move despite the exhaustion that screamed at me, feeling the forest pressing in tighter with every step. Hours later, as dusk began to approach, I stumbled across a small, abandoned logging hut. It was dilapidated and half collapsed, but it was a shelter, a fragile barrier against the forest outside. I entered cautiously, scanning the shadows, knowing that the creatures would not hesitate to strike if I lingered. Inside, I found remnants of human presence, old supplies, a broken cot, the faint scent of smoke. I tried to gather what I could use to defend myself, but there was almost nothing. My heart pounded as I listened to the forest just beyond the thin walls, the whispers and soft growls mingling with the evening breeze. I realized then that this was only a temporary sanctuary, a pause in a relentless hunt that would continue the moment I stepped outside. The night fell quickly. Darkness enveloped the hut, but I could hear them. Footsteps that should not have existed, rustling movements without bodies, low growls vibrating through the ground. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to become invisible, trying to convince myself that they might not notice me if I stayed perfectly still. The glowing eyes appeared through the broken windows, scattered across the clearing, watching. I dared not breathe too deeply. Every instinct told me that if I moved, if I even whispered my own name, I would not survive. The forest was patient, but it was not indifferent. It would not let me leave without testing me, tormenting me, reminding me of its power. I spent the night awake, trembling, listening to sounds that were impossible, unexplainable, and utterly alien. When the first faint light of dawn broke the horizon, I made my decision. I could not stay in the hut. It would only delay the inevitable. Whatever creatures lurked in the forest, whatever intelligence had marked me, would not stop. I had to move. I gathered my meager supplies, checked the stream for direction, and began walking, careful to make minimal noise. The forest seemed to pulse around me, alive and aware, but I pressed on. Every step was measured, every breath deliberate. I could feel the eyes on me constantly, following, studying, anticipating, but I refused to look back. Survival demanded focus, and fear had become a tool to sharpen my senses. Hours later, I reached a wider river, its water deeper and swifter than the stream I had been following. The current was strong, but it offered a chance of escape. I waded in cautiously, letting the water carry me downstream, my body aching, my muscles screaming for rest, yet my mind alert, scanning the shadows along the banks. The forest pressed against me from both sides, the trees bending as though reaching toward me, and every so often, I glimpsed figures watching from the edges, tall, thin, faceless, their eyes glowing faintly. They did not follow in the water, but their presence remained palpable. I realized then that I was leaving their immediate reach, but not their awareness. They had marked me, and the memory of their attention would follow me for the rest of my life. By mid-afternoon, I reached a small clearing where human structures appeared in the distance. Smoke rose faintly from a distant village, and I could see movement that was unmistakably human. Relief surged through me, but caution tempered it. I approached slowly, careful to avoid attracting attention from anything lurking in the shadows. The forest around me seemed to hesitate as if allowing me this brief respite, the whispers fading, the growls receding into the distance. I realized then that I had survived the Amazon, the crash, the endless night, and the relentless hunt. I had survived, but the knowledge of what I had seen, what had stalked me, and what had marked me would remain forever. I stumbled into the village, exhausted, filthy, and shaking. The villagers stared, unsure if I was a threat or a living ghost. I tried to speak, to explain, but the words failed me. I was alive, but I felt hollow, changed. The forest had let me leave, but I knew I had not escaped it. Whatever had survived the crash with me, whatever had followed me, would remain in the jungle, waiting. I had cheated death, survived the hunt, but I could never forget the whispers, the glowing eyes, and the feeling that the forest itself was alive and patient, and it had claimed a part of me that would never return. I looked back once, toward the shadowed line of trees, and I could swear that a figure, impossibly tall and impossibly thin, stood at the edge, watching. I blinked, and it was gone, but I knew it had never left. The Amazon had spared my body, but it had kept my fear, and it would carry it forever. I survived the plane crash. I survived the first night. I survived the hunt, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The forest never forgets, and it never forgives. Even after reaching the village, the forest had not released me. Its presence clung to me like a shadow that refused to fade. I could feel it in my dreams, in the silence of my room, in every shadow on the street. But I had survived the plane crash and the relentless hunt, so I convinced myself I was safe. For a while, the whispers ceased, the glowing eyes disappeared, and the nights felt normal, but I knew that normal was temporary, a fragile illusion the forest allowed to give me false confidence. Weeks passed. I tried to return to a semblance of life. I sought out doctors to treat minor injuries. I tried to sleep. I tried to eat. I spoke to rescue teams, journalists, anyone who would listen about the crash, but no one believed the otherworldly horrors I had witnessed. They asked about other survivors. They asked for names. They asked for proof. There was none. Only I had lived. Only I had seen the creatures. Only I carried the memory of the patient. Eternal forest. One night, months later, I woke sweating. The room was silent, yet the air felt thick, heavy, and cold. My heart pounded as I realized the whispers had returned. Soft at first, almost comforting, but unmistakable. My name, called in that hollow, alien voice. I sat up in bed, scanning the shadows of the room, and then I saw it, standing at the corner, perfectly still. Tall, impossibly thin, its limbs bent unnaturally. Its eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. It had found me here, in the city, far from the jungle. The forest had not released me. It had marked me. Panic surged, and I ran from the room, heart hammering, crashing through the apartment, desperate to escape. But it was always just behind me, patient, moving silently, always watching, always waiting. Every corner I turned, every shadow I glanced at, I saw that faint glow, felt that presence. I realized then that the forest was not confined to the Amazon. Its reach extended through memory, through fear, through the bond it had created with me. I was tethered to it. I fled to the streets, to crowds, to lights, but none of it mattered. The creature remained with me, unseen by others, a shadow of the forest's will. I tried to explain, to tell anyone who would listen, but they only saw a terrified man, delirious with fear. I realized then that my survival had come at a cost. I was free of the forest physically, but spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. I belonged to it now. Sleep became impossible. Every shadow in the room, every reflection in a window, every pattern in the dark made me flinch. I could feel the creatures observing, always assessing, never leaving. It was as if the forest had left a fragment of itself inside me, a seed of its will, and it would grow over time. I had escaped with my life, but the fear would never fade. I would never walk alone in silence again. Every leaf, every whisper of wind, every rustle in the night would remind me of what I had survived and what had survived with me. Months turned into a year. I avoided forests, avoided travel, avoided anything that could reconnect me with the jungle. Yet I could not escape the memories, the sensory impressions, the lingering shadows. The world I once trusted had been replaced with a heightened awareness of unseen forces, of patient hunters waiting just beyond perception. I was always alert, always cautious, always expecting the whisper of my name. And then I understood the truth. Survival had not been an end. It had been a beginning. The Amazon had spared me from death, but it had given me something far worse. Knowledge, awareness, the realization that the world is older, darker, and far more patient than humanity can imagine. The forest had marked me as its witness, its messenger, its warning. I could not undo it. I could not escape it. I was alive, but part of me had already become its extension. Sometimes, at night, I swear I can feel its breath on my skin. I can hear the rustle of leaves, the distant snapping of twigs, the faint, deliberate whisper of my name. And I know, deep in my bones, that it has never left, that it will never leave. The forest waits, patient, eternal, and I am forever bound to its will. I survived the Amazon plane crash. I survived the hunt, but I can never escape the forest. It is not merely a place, it is a presence. It is alive, and it remembers. Even after the initial year, even after I convinced myself that life had returned to some semblance of normal, I realized that the forest had never released me. Its presence was in my blood, in my dreams, and in the shadows that moved when no one else was watching. Every sound, every gust of wind, every flicker of movement in the corner of my vision reminded me that the Amazon was patient, eternal, and aware of me. I had survived, but survival was no longer my victory. It was my sentence. I tried everything to convince myself that the sightings were hallucinations, the whispers just echoes of trauma. I saw doctors, therapists, even tried meditation to calm my mind, but nothing worked. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves in my apartment at night, though there were no trees nearby. I could feel something watching me from corners, from the ceiling, from places where human eyes could not see. The glowing eyes would sometimes appear in mirrors or in reflections, just barely there, and I would catch my own reflection staring back at me, twisted in ways I could not explain. One night, I found myself walking through a part of the city I did not recognize. The streets were quiet, almost unnaturally so. My legs moved of their own accord, guided by some instinct I no longer fully controlled. I came upon a small park, an island of greenery in the urban sprawl, and there it was, the figure I had seen in the jungle, tall, impossibly thin, its limbs bent at impossible angles. Its face was blank, featureless, yet I knew it saw me. It had followed me across miles of concrete and asphalt, beyond the jungle itself. I froze, unable to move, as the whispers returned. Now a chorus of voices, chanting my name softly, insistently, reverently. I ran. The creature followed. Each step I took seemed to carry me farther from safety, but never from it. I darted into alleyways, crossed streets, ignored traffic, my senses honed by fear, my muscles screaming in protest. It mirrored me, always at the edge of perception, disappearing when I looked directly, but returning the instant I diverted my gaze. I realized then that it was not bound by space or distance. The forest had taught it patience, and patience was infinite. Days passed. I stopped sleeping for fear of dreams that were no longer dreams but visitations. In the darkness, I could hear it move just outside my apartment, could hear the whispers circling, could feel the faint pressure on my skin, as though the forest itself had pressed its weight against my body. I tried to leave the city, tried to travel across the country, but the creatures appeared wherever I went. Airports, highways, even isolated cabins in the mountains offered no refuge. They were patient, eternal, and their domain extended beyond the jungle. I began to notice more signs of their presence in subtle ways. Patterns in shadows, faint footprints on mud or dust, leaves that moved without wind, glimpses of tall, thin shapes watching from a distance, always just outside focus. The creatures were not mindless. They studied me, learned my habits, anticipated my movements. They were guardians of the forest, extensions of its will, and I was tethered to them by a bond I could not sever. I tried to document what was happening, to photograph them, to record their presence. Cameras failed, batteries died inexplicably, lenses blurred when the figures were near, phones malfunctioned, screens flickering as though refusing to display reality. Every attempt to prove the events to the outside world ended in failure. The forest demanded secrecy. It was as if acknowledging its existence aloud would break some covenant and allow it to consume me fully. Over time, I learned to move differently. I walked silently, avoided forests and shadows, never traveled at night, and kept to crowds whenever possible. My life became a pattern of avoidance, of careful calculations, of vigilance against unseen observers. Yet the whispers never stopped, the pressure never eased, and the glowing eyes never fully disappeared from the corners of my perception. Even in the light of day, I could feel them watching, waiting, patient. I realized that the forest did not merely mark me. It had claimed a part of my consciousness, a fragment of my awareness that would forever be tuned to its will. Then came the night I understood the true depth of the forest's reach. I was walking home after a long day, empty streets stretching before me, and the air grew heavy and damp, like the Amazon itself had been transported into the city. Shadows shifted unnaturally, forming patterns too precise to be random. I heard the whispers clearly, my name called softly, then repeated, then elongated into a melody I could not recognize. I turned, and I saw them. Not one, but many, emerging from every shadow, every alleyway, every corner, tall, thin, bending in impossible ways, their eyes glowing dimly in the faint streetlight. They did not move directly toward me. They did not attack. They only observed, patient and eternal. I understood then that I had not survived to leave. I had survived to bear witness, to carry the knowledge, to feel the fear. They had followed me across continents, through cities, through civilization, and still they waited. The forest was no longer a place. It was a presence that existed wherever it chose. I was tethered to it, and it had no intention of letting me go. I ran, but no matter how far I went, no matter how fast, the whispers never stopped. They followed me into hotels, into apartments, into rooms where no light could reach. I would see glimpses of their forms in reflections, in peripheral vision, in the subtle movement of shadows on walls. They did not speak. They did not act. They simply waited, patient, eternal, reminding me that the forest never forgets, never forgives, and never releases what it claims. Now, I move constantly, never resting, always alert, always listening for the faintest whisper or the tiniest movement. The forest is not behind me, it is within me, and it is everywhere. I am alive, but I am not free. I am bound to the jungle, tethered to its will, and haunted by its patient, eternal presence. I survived the Amazon plane crash. I survived the hunt. I survived the first night, the following days, the relentless shadows. Yet survival is only the beginning. The forest has claimed a part of me that will never leave, a part of me that whispers when the wind blows, a part of me that will always remember and obey its patient, eternal gaze. And I know, without question, that one day it will come for me fully. Until then, I remain alive, a witness, a messenger, a survivor, and forever haunted by the forest that never forgets.